Anyhow, this is an interview with Ethan Welshon, who has been a student at Alpine Valley School from all of his life. Actually, he started being at this school, I believe, as a kindergartner.
Yes, when I was, I believe, about four or 5 years old.
Right. And he graduated from this school. Would like to introduce to our viewers this particular school model, which is called Alpine Valley School, but it goes back to a Sudbury school philosophy, which is based on freedom, on creativity, and on not telling children what to do. And because it is so unusual that children get really all this freedom all their life to decide what to do every day of their school day, I thought it would be very interesting to hear from a graduate of such a program how he experienced his life, his schooling, and what he's up to right now. So I'm very excited to introduce to all of you Ethan Welshon. Thank you, Ethan, for taking the time to talking about this. I'm really curious about your upbringing, about your life perspectives, and about the things that you found valuable in the program.
Certainly.
So you told us you started school as a kindergartner pretty much, or
correct,
even before.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any memories, like the first memories or glimpses of what school meant for you when you started out?
I have some memories from when I was young, but they're not very substantive, and they are mostly of events and hanging out with friends and playing and doing things like that in an older building that the school used to be in.
So it was in a different building when you started out?
At first we started out in a rented building,
mm-hmm.
And then eventually we were able to get our own building, and that's where we ended up in this building.
Now your father is the founder and the director of the school, so that's a very special connection because he really espoused this philosophy, and your whole family did espouse this philosophy.
Certainly, yeah. He founded it, not alone, with the help of some other people,
mm-hmm.
But it was originally his idea. And basically the idea, he was a public school teacher before this, and my mother is also a public school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And when they had me, they did not want to put me into the public school system. And so they found alternative educations,
yes.
And the Sudbury model stuck and was something that he wanted to do, and there was no Sudbury schools in the Colorado area, and so he founded AVS and started AVS.
Awesome. And so, do you have siblings that also went to the
I
school?
do, yeah. I have one sister who is in the school right now. Her name is Ellie, and she's currently a student. I think she'll graduate next year.
Yeah. You know, the thing that I was a preschool teacher for 17 years, and of course in preschool we still experience that children have so much joy going to school.
Certainly, yeah.
But then once, elementary grades roll around, I actually presently know a good number of young children that really don't like school, for lack of a better word. Some
right.
are even depressed about school.
Certainly.
And how was your experience? Would you be able to remember, like in elementary grades, how it was going to school every day? Did you have that sense of dislike and boredom that so many kids have?
Mostly no. All in all, no. It's funny because this is probably the only school where students feel that the summer is too long and that weekends are too long, and that those are breaks that they have to take and they just can't wait to get back to school.
Isn't that lovely?
It's incredible, and honestly, now that I'm into my adult life, I would love to come back to a place like this.
Yes.
The adult world is great, and what I'm doing is awesome, but this is a truly special place, and it's a great time. So when I was young, it was actually kind of different than the school is now because it was in its pioneering phase.
Yes.
Where the school is still very young. The school's been around for quite a while now, and most of the original students are gone. In fact, I think my sister and one of her friends are the only original students, and they're not even quite original students. They're just from the original building. And so my memories of school when I was young are very fond, always having a good time. There was, of course, periods where a friend and I may not have gotten along or I was having a hard time, but that comes with life and comes with being a child.
Yes.
And I think what was best about the school is that I had the ability to deal with that. Instead of having somebody else deal with it and a system deal with it, I just took care of it myself. My friends and I got through it or got along, or however it sorted itself out, we sorted it out ourselves.
Can you describe that to us? Because that's kind of very interesting. If you had a conflict with a friend, like the typical childhood disagreements or nasty words that people say to each other,
mm-hmm.
or maybe even hitting or pushing, or
Certainly.
What's going on in the schools today, bullying.
Right.
How did you deal with it? Did you feel like you didn't need the help of the adults, or did you have like something that just came to you that you just knew how to do it?
Well, it was certainly that it didn't, I learned it. It didn't just come to me and I knew how to do it. It was a situation where um, because I was a lifer and had never been to another school or any other system, um, adapted to it because it's all I had. And then other kids that had come from public schools had a harder time adapting to it. But basically, the system worked by we had a judicial committee, which is very similar to the court and trial system of the actual world. And so, if the friend and I had a disagreement and we could not work it out ourselves, we could write it up. One of us could write it up if it was well, let's just say, for instance, that somebody was verbally harassing me. There was a specific rule against verbal harassment. And so what I would do is I'd fill out a write-up sheet, and the sheet would basically list a brief description of what happened, where it happened, the time it happened, the day it happened, who was involved, who may be witnesses, and the rule that I'm citing. And then it goes to the JC, or Judicial Committee, which is comprised of four members. There's an older member, a younger member, and a middle member, and then a staff member. And within that group, and sometimes separated, there will be the chair of the JC, which is always separated, never one of the members, who runs the meeting, of course, and is similar to a judge. Although they do not command it, they run the meeting, and then it's on a voting basis. And then a secretary to write down and record all the happenings. And then from there, it will be investigated and decided whether or not the person that the offender was guilty or not guilty, and then they will be charged and then have an opportunity to plead not guilty or not guilty. And then if they plead guilty, they will receive a sentence, which in that case, a typical sentence for verbal harassment is like they have to do the other person's chore, which is something we did at the school as chores. And so they might have to do somebody else's chore, or they can't talk to them for a certain period of time, things of that nature. And then they also have the opportunity to plead not guilty if they think that they are falsely accused, where they have the opportunity to go to a trial, which is very similar to the JC, except that its decision is final.
And so then you felt that because I find it very interesting that a system, an education system that's basically built around freedom, would come up by developing a judicial system within the school.
Certainly.
Because what it teaches me, or what it made me sense, is like, that even though freedom is a fundamental right and need of human beings, but justice is too. And there's no freedom without justice, and no justice without freedom in a way.
Precisely, yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that it's almost like the organic outgrowth of your system, that you developed a justice system within this system.
Right, and it grows in its own during the time it's being used. So laws can be changed and adapted. So if a law does not suit the general populace, they can adapt the rule, strike the rule, add a rule if they need to, and so they can. We all agree to live by this code at school, and because everyone agrees to it, it works very well.
Yes, and because you actually, from this type of interaction, you learn also citizenship.
Right.
You're not just learning to follow someone else's rule. You're learning your responsible citizenship, actually, and dealing with difficult situations all the time, and managing them, and getting your own sense of justice, actually.
Precisely, yeah. And there are certainly cases where it was simply worked out between the two parties, and that does happen. Sometimes there's a disagreement or a misunderstanding, and it never makes it to the judicial system. It's handled amongst two friends or two people.
Yes.
And it never relieves that.
Something that I'm curious about, and I spoke already to your father about it, is that I've been trained as a teacher in the Montessori philosophy. And so one of the things that we are being told, so to speak, is that we need to really provide a lot of stimulation to our children.
Right.
And I believe at this school, this is not necessarily a part of the teaching philosophy for the teacher. So that I go to work in the morning and I set up an art project or a math curriculum, whatever. So, but what's curious to me, or what I would like to hear from you, and I don't have any doubt that it's happening, but how do you acquire like the simple basic 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic? Is there sort of like a curriculum that is available in the environment where you can go to when you want to? Or is there something that is being so open that some children might miss it. So I'm going to be a little bit devil's advocate in my question.
Sure. So those particular three, which we get a lot of questions about, actually generally are organically found, I guess you could say. They are, most of the time, students do not learn reading, writing, and arithmetic through a class. Most of the time, they simply learn it because they want to do it. So, for instance, you might see a student reading, and if you didn't know how to read, you'd maybe want to read that book, and so you learn to read. And you learn to read either by some of the other students may teach you, or you might ask a staff member to help you with the words, or you might just figure it out on their own. It all depends on the level.
That's interesting.
And so people...
So you would say, let's say you would say that most of the students in your class learn to read because it's a big problem, as you know, in the educational system in the United States, that the reading levels don't come, online in third grade and beyond. So would you say that in your school environment, children naturally learn to read without any problem?
Absolutely, yeah. Generally, it comes from a case of where they simply want to know something, and as we all know nowadays, that the internet is the best way to get things. The only way you can get onto the internet and find out is if you can read and write, and so they eventually learn it. They do struggle, and they have to have people spell for them, and maybe read some words to them, but eventually they do learn it, and that's simply how they learn it. That's how I learned, and that's how quite a few people have learned. Is they wanted the skill, they wanted the outcome of what it was, and so they learned it. And that's true with math as well. And they learn it because they use it. So in various things, I don't even have an example, but for whatever reason, things come up and people want to learn math. And they either just want to learn it and they take a class in it, and the math is the one that generally does get a class. And so to take a class in something, if there is not a class already running, the way it's formed is a student would go to a staff member and talk to them about arranging a class for math.
So you do have teachers that do provide certain classes.
And so it happens that it depends on the mix of the staff, but we generally have somebody who has the skill of teaching math, and so they will generally teach it. But let's say that for whatever reason we had no one that could teach math. Or in a more applicable sense, we never had a physicist. But when we wanted to do physics class and wanted a physics class, we imported a physicist. So we found a fellow who actually was not a physics teacher, but a physicist by trade or by education. And he taught us physics. He agreed to come in, and the school paid for him to come in and teach a class on physics. And it was an excellent class, and it went very well. And it was learning from somebody who's using as opposed to a teacher is just interesting and excellent. And so if a student wants a class, they simply arrange it. And if the instructor is not sourceable through the school system, they can import one.
That is so interesting. Now that answers a question for me, because what I'm also seeing, like in the traditional school system right now, what's happening is that even teachers that are trained to teach math or physics or whatever, their school curriculum is so narrow that they don't have any creative room to wiggle, so to speak. They cannot adapt their teaching to the group of children that sits in front of them.
Right.
So by doing it the way your school is doing it, the teacher can come in and really teach the children that are there.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that the students they're never segregated by age or anything of that nature. So, for instance, in a physics class or in let's say a math class, you may have people that are of all different ages but at the same level, as opposed to all the same age and at different levels, which obviously would be a problem. And so you end up with a scenario where you're getting the best education essentially possible because the students, want to be there. No one's saying, I don't want to be in this class. They all choose to be there and choose to leave when they do. And then also, they're all at the same skill level or close to. And then the classes are always small. And so the instructor or the teacher, whoever it may be, has a lot of one-on-one time. And especially if it's an in-house instructor, like we typically have with math, reading, writing, if it's necessary, they're around all the time, and so you can always go to them for questions if you're doing your math and you're reading something and you need to know a question. You can go and ask somebody for it.
You know, there is actually science evidence through science that motivation is a key factor for learning and memory. They can prove that subjects in an experiment that are motivated to learn have a much better retention and memory for the task that they learn.
Certainly.
Than people that are forced to learn the same
Right.
task. These were just equal groups. One group was forced to learn the task, one force was given freedom to learn the task. And they find that. So we have a lot of science today that we don't apply in our educational system.
Certainly, and a lot of it is common sense. I mean, if you figure, probably one of the hardest things we learn in life is the human language.
Yeah.
And for us, English.
Mm-hmm.
And if you imagine a young child, a baby, learns to speak English simply by observing.
Yes.
They never go to a class for it.
Yes.
They never get instruction on it. They have no way to receive instruction other than their ears. It's the same way they learn to walk and eat and live. And those are essentially some of the hardest things we ever learn. And the rest, that can be applied to anything else.
Yes.
And if you don't learn it another way, and you learn it only in the natural way, then you will learn it much faster and much more successfully. And that has been my experience.
Yes. And you know, the thing is also that the children can learn more than one language by simply absorbing what is in their environment.
Certainly.
By making no effort whatsoever. And that's actually a field that I'm very engaged in personally, because I feel we have eclipsed the earlier years of development, even birth to 3, when many of those developments are actually happening. And like you said, you know, a young child of 5 could be sitting in on a physics class, and he might only grasp certain parts of it, but whatever he is able to grasp will be very inspiring to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas maybe a 14-year-old grasps a whole more abstract concepts, but it's actually the inspiration and the excitement that causes the learning much more than detailed intellectual knowledge. Would you agree?
Absolutely, and that's generally true with other things, and they are often motivated essentially by fun.
Yes.
You know, you might see somebody playing a computer game that looks really fun, and the only way to achieve the computer game is to learn to read, and to do that, and so you do. And that's true with other things too. And then oftentimes the other things are further along the line when somebody has an idea of perhaps what they want to do in their life or where they want to go. And sometimes there are certain things that people just they learn because they know that they need to. They may not be particularly interested in the subject, but they learn to do whatever it is because they know that they will need it, and so they're motivated to do that anyways.
Right. Now, you know, we're trained, at least in the traditional sense, that education needs to have a broad spectrum.
Right.
And this is sort of like another question I have, because children are, you know, they live in the moment, but unless somebody teaches me something about a violin, I may not know that violins exist, or unless somebody speaks Chinese to me, I may not know that Chinese is even an option.
Right.
And so this is something that I was interested in for your school. Like, how do you can't generate everything as a child. Some of the things have to just be there and arouse your maybe interest. Can you say how that maybe happens? Like, I know you are into sailing. So is that something you picked up as a vacation sport with your family, or was this coming through the school that you learned to sail boats, or your interest was sparked in navigation maybe, or ocean sciences?
Basically, what I think it is in the particular idea. So for the audience, I'm a sailor on a boat called the Hawaiian Chieftain, which sails up the west coast. And so how I got into that is my entire life I've enjoyed adventure and traveling and doing things of that nature, which most people do. And in fact, a lot of people, it gets suppressed by the general system. But here, that kind of stuff never gets suppressed, and it just happens. And so what ends up happening is, in my case, I was interested in adventure. And so somewhere along the way, I think it was a friend had mentioned that these sailing vessels exist and have a program that you can go and sail on them. And so at one point when I was looking for some adventure, in fact, after I got done with a season of work, I found it and then went out and did it. And so what that has to do with the school is that I essentially had the motivation and the know-how to know what I like, find it, and achieve it. And so I did. I knew that I was interested in adventure, So I found adventure in the form of sailing, and then I achieved it by applying and doing their training program.
Yes. I think that is a very key story that you're telling and a key thing to consider in our society, because usually our desires, our dreams are first being neglected or squashed.
Mm-hmm.
And we're being told that this is not anything serious,
right?
Nothing that earns a living or nothing
right.
that makes a good job,
right?
And that's not the truth in many cases,
right?
I mean, there's any amount of creative potential in a knowledge like this, or in a professional understanding of this.
Certainly. Well, and in my opinion, what really matters is happiness.
Yes.
And so as long as you can do what you want to do and still be happy, or find a way to do what you want to do to be happy, that's what really matters.
That was one of my questions too. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy do you find your life to be? How old are you now?
I'm 20 years old.
You're 20.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that you have happiness? You have acquired maybe more happiness than some of your peers the same age that come
absolutely.
from different systems?
Absolutely. My friends that that have gone to traditional schooling and public school systems generally are struggling, and not all of them. They're all happy individuals. Although when they hear about some of the things that I'm doing, or some of my classmates that went to this school with me, they somehow think that it's something that is not reachable by them, and that for whatever reason they can't do it, and that the people that went to this school are somehow special, which is of course not true. And the only reason that we are doing it and they're not doing it is because we have always had the motivation to do only what we want,
yes.
and achieve the things we want to achieve, and have nobody pushing us to do anything else. Whereas they are being pushed to do things like get a job, go to college, get married, things of that variety, which maybe they don't want to do, maybe they do want to do. And so they're all happy individuals, although they are not as in touch with what makes them happy as the general ABS graduate.
It could be that they project their happiness into these symbols of happiness, like what you said: marriage, money, status,
absolutely,
success of academics. But it's not necessarily the happiness that they truly feel in the moment.
Absolutely.
I think you're right about us being programmed to pursue happiness,
right,
without really knowing if we're happy right now.
Right.
Yes. There's so many wonderful quotes, even by Albert Einstein, that tell us that creativity is more, or imagination is more important than knowledge.
Sure.
And yet all of our traditional system is so built around knowledge and the measurement of knowledge.
Yeah, and that's something you never really run into at ABS, is there's never any tests or measurement of knowledge unless you want it. And sometimes people do. Sometimes they want to take a test. People will generally take a test if they think that they are going to use it in their later years. Like, for instance, I later went to a welding school,
mm-hmm.
and they had a test to get into that welding school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pre-took the test, and it was fine. And I took that test by choice. But no one ever imposed a measurement of my knowledge on me.
So from what I know, and I only know a few students
mm-hmm.
that are in your program, I believe you have very gifted children here, or teenagers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from the children that come from other school programs and have not had good experiences in other more traditional school programs, when they come here, is there something that you can tell us? Why do they suddenly relax? Why do they suddenly start enjoying learning? Why do they suddenly show that they actually have talents, where
right.
in other programs they looked like they weren't learning at all?
Well, I can certainly. So I'd like to clarify two things. First of all, the students that come here are not in any way special.
Mm-hmm.
We are just the average people, and
mm-hmm.
we come from all walks of life and all different. Some of us, like myself, went here my entire life, and that's obviously the optimal situation. But there are plenty of people who come here late into their teens
mm-hmm.
And succeed. There is, for the people that came from a public school system or some alternative system, there is a steep learning curve, which is simply having freedom. Being told when to eat and when to use the bathroom and when to show up for school and what homework you need to do when you get home and what you need to think and who you need to root for and things like that. They come from a system where that's been true for their entire school career. And if they get here when they're 16, they've been doing that for quite a long time. They've essentially been going to a 9-to-5 job that they don't get paid for.
That's correct.
They fill out paperwork all day. They have some boss or a teacher breathing down their neck. And so they come into this situation where no one is judging them. No one is telling them that they need to eat or they can't eat, or that they need to read a book or they can't read a book. And so they come into this situation with freedom, and generally it starts out as kind of a shock to the system, where they don't know what to do with their freedom. They have never had the ability to be in a place and no one's telling them what to do, no one's telling them what they need to think. They can just do whatever they want. And so at first it's kind of a shock, and they generally don't know what to do. And then eventually something sparks their interest. They see somebody perhaps building a model, or they see some class that interests them. We'll take the physics example because that's one of my interests. So they see the physics class, and they know they see that it's interesting. Maybe perhaps they see a test going on in physics class, and they're interested in that. So they join the class, and then eventually they end up making friends or pursuing their own passion. Maybe they don't even have a class. Maybe they know that they're interested in theater or something along those lines, and they pursue it on their own without an instructor or without a class. They pursue it simply just by using the internet, using the books in the library, calling whoever they need to call, and learning it in their own way. And so they find these interests or something they have always wanted to do and pursue them, and usually achieve them.
Would you say that it's also like that the children or students amongst each other inspire each other? Like somebody might be really inspired in drama, and then suddenly everybody else gets kind of curious about the same.
Oh yeah, big time. That happens. That happens in a big way, where somebody is just completely fired up about whatever the subject may be, and so they're radiating this inspirational attitude.
Yes.
And so the other people find that it's just incredibly interesting, and sometimes they find that it's really interesting, they stick with it, and they really like it, and other times they go to the class or read the book or do whatever the activity is, and then they are, they get their fill of it and stop, and that's fine. Maybe they find that theater isn't for them, and they really don't care for it. They had a good time doing it, and then they stop and pursue whatever does truly interest them.
The story that you told about the students that come here, and for the first few weeks maybe they don't know what to do with their freedom, reminds me of when Germany was reunited. And the whole Eastern world, when the Iron Curtain was finally lifted, that's what they saw. That the older generation that was so used to this non-freedom, they couldn't adjust to the freedom and democracy and free market enterprises.
Right.
They wouldn't take to it, and they were actually more depressed in those years that the suicide rates would actually go up,
right,
instead of down, with more freedom.
Right.
Because the people were so programmed to obeying and following the system, and then suddenly they couldn't work with freedom. I have read it from many different authors that say every child is a genius. Personally, I believe there's a lot of truth to that, and that we need to guard that learning truly comes from the inside.
Right.
That we're not empty vessels when we are born that need to be filled with something from the outside in order to become smart.
Precisely.
I believe there is a natural potential that is actually having an inner law and dynamic to wanting to unfold.
Right.
And that it is up to us to provide an environment, like for a plant actually, an environment in which that potential can just open up like a seed or like a flower and just totally, unfold its potential. The other part of me that is more like questioning is saying, well, what if these kids, let's say, and this is a real danger in our time, get hooked, let's say, to the internet or to computer games, things of that nature. Because what we actually know is that the brain can actually get hooked. You can actually have neurological changes and even get into mild addictions, and they can be big problems later on.
Sure.
And this is one of the questions I had for you is like, when teens don't know the dangers that are out there, or maybe even younger children, it's like with eating sugar. I mean, you could eat sugar all day long,
right?
But you won't get a nutrition from it, or sweet candy. So how is that particular issue handled in your school program? On a dietary level, on a computer internet type level, and with anything else that is of that nature, where a child might do things just because they want to,
Right.
but then maybe 3 years later they go like, oh my gosh, I harmed myself by doing it.
Right. And so I guess I will start with the dietary, which is that it is not regulated here. And so children do come in and they do like to, sometimes they'll gorge themselves on candy, but they usually regret it because, as most of us do, we end up feeling sick after eating too much sugar.
Yes.
And so they eventually learn their lesson on doing that.
And that works.
And that also does come from other people. They might say eating that much sugar is bad for you, or student to student, or I feel really crummy after I've eaten all this cake or whatever.
Would that be something that might be also going to the court that you have, like when somebody doesn't eat their lunch, or?
No, certainly not. It usually is the result. If a certain kid maybe eats a bunch of candy and gets really rowdy, what he does after that may end up in the judicial system.
Yes.
But the fact that he did not usually doesn't. Or the fact that he ate the sugar or whatever it may be generally does not. And if you don't eat your lunch, generally you're just unhappy. And so the students learn this. Sometimes they don't eat their lunch, or they forget to eat their lunch, and they find that they're really unhappy. And usually somebody says, "Well, did you eat your lunch?" And that's a common thing is, if you're unhappy, perhaps eat your lunch.
Yeah.
Or go get some food.
Right.
And so people learn that, and it becomes a norm, and it stays in the system. And so, if a kid is unhappy, another student might suggest, "Let's go eat our lunch."
Right.
And eventually they do learn it. It's usually when they're young they don't learn it. They get caught up in the moment where they're just having an excellent time, and then
enjoying the candy.
Right. Well, not even enjoying the candy, maybe playing or reading or whatever they're doing. They get so caught up in the good time that they're having doing whatever they're doing that they forget to eat.
Yes.
And that happens. And to be honest, I'm still guilty of that. There's times where I'm so intense in what I'm doing that I forget to eat my food all day and end up quite hungry. But everyone learns, and then on a day-to-day basis, they eat their lunch because they know they'll get unhappy if they don't. They certainly get hungry if they don't.
Let me just tell you that Maria Montessori had a lot of wisdom. She was an educator that looked beyond the surface rules of education, and she said actually that was one of her goals of education, to get children so interested in a task that they would forget everything else. And she actually described this as what she called normalization, but it's really that your mind is so deeply immersed in your own interest, in your own passion, that so many things happen internally that bring health and balance and well-being to you.
Certainly. And, it sounds like she's interested in essentially keying that into people and into putting them into situations where that will happen.
Yes.
And the truth is, from my experience, that the kids are born with that.
Yes.
Every little kid likes to throw a ball or drop something or do whatever it is to actuate something, and they learn from that.
Right.
And so kids are naturally curious. They always want to learn. And so you really don't need to put that into kids.
Right.
In the typical system, in the public school system, kids get trained essentially that they have to be initiated to learn.
Yes.
And so they don't learn until they're initiated by whatever their system may be.
Yes.
Which is unfortunate because we're born with this great need to learn, and this everyone loves to learn, and then they go into a school system where it's taken away from them, and they don't know how to handle not having it.
Yes.
Essentially like a drug addiction, where they get used to having this drug, this control, and then all of a sudden it's taken away from them. For instance, when they graduate a public high school and go into the actual world where they don't have anyone telling them what to do. They don't have anyone telling them when to eat, when to use the bathroom. They go into this world, and then they don't have any of that. Whereas at the AVS and in the Sudbury model, they live with that in their entire lives. They live with the freedom their entire lives that they will face when they're adults.
Right.
And so when they do become adults and they go into the larger world, it's by no means a shock.
Yeah.
They will go into the larger world, and just as their entire life is gone, or their entire time at AVS or whatever the school may be, no one's ever telling them when to eat. No one's ever telling them when to wake up. No one's ever telling them what they need to do in running their lives. And so they're used to that, and they know how to live that way, and they're happy doing that. And so people do.
I can totally understand that. And I also believe, and that's actually another Montessori understanding, is that children have a built-in sense of order And
Mhm.
I think it stretches to every area of their life. It can be order in the environment, it can be order in your lifestyle,
Certainly.
in eating, what you describe, eating, sleeping, and taking care of your needs. Um, I mean, you see sometimes children running out in an ice cold day without shoes and without a jacket.
Of course. Well,
So,
and maybe they're learning by doing that because
yes.
you certainly learn a lesson from that.
So sometimes I believe by us adults reacting so strongly and making children stop and do that and eat now and being so interfering with their freedom that we create their resistance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my hope is that we create the resistance, and by taking our intensity out of it, we will allow them to really explore certain borders
Mhm.
where they're not comfortable and say, well, I'm going to take care of myself now.
Right, which does happen, and people. There are always the situations at a school like this where somebody is pushing the boundaries, and depending upon the boundary, that may or may not go checked. Certainly, if it's a boundary where there is, say, physical damage that is going to happen, like running out in the cold, you might get cold, but you're not going to get physically hurt. But maybe jumping off something that's too high or something of that nature where you're bound to get hurt,
Right.
those usually the judicial system will handle that because it's real or potential harm to somebody's personal safety. So there's certainly people aren't going to end up getting hurt.
That's wonderful.
But they do learn, they do push the boundaries, and oftentimes the boundaries are things like, how they can treat their friends and personal boundaries, and they do push those, and that's a huge learning thing that everyone does learn.
I think that social learning and being in community with others and learning certain experiences of respect, but also extending the same respect to others, I think that is so much more important than we give it credit to in our traditional school system. But the other question that I have for you is like, and I think many viewers eventually will have the same question. I have a certain theory about it, but I want to hear you first.
Certainly.
When you spend time learning other things than might be part of a curriculum, let's say if you spend a lot of time doing video games or doing even just movies or going to town, walking around Walmart, or you do have all these freedoms.
Right.
I just want to learn to trust the child in an even more deeper way than I already believe I do. Do you feel that there is any regret in your past experience of your life where you say, well, I just did that for a whole year, spending my school day in an environment that wasn't really teaching me anything, rather than really focusing on something that I could have done with my time?
Right.
Do you feel that way? Do you see that in other students around you from the past, that they misuse, let's say, times of their lives, doing things that are not beneficial to them?
Generally, the biggest thing, so for myself, there isn't a whole lot of that because I strongly believe that everything I did made me who I am.
Yeah.
And I never, anything that I did for that, because there were certainly times where I played video games for a long time, or maybe just hung out with my friends and talked to them and played games with them, and we just hung out and did our thing. All of those are valuable skills that you learn someplace, and you need someplace else.
Yes.
And so you learn from those things, or they create the motivation to go learn something else.
Yes.
I mean, that's often the case here, especially with, say, video games, is where they get really interested in, and so they get interested in perhaps the art of it, the design of it, even just the game sparks an interest in whatever it may be, science, history in a lot of games, drama, whatever it may be. It sparks an interest in them, and so they pursue that.
Yeah.
And so it's by no means a waste of time. And so that takes care of the kind of people that have been here for a long time. And then students that generally do have regrets are generally students that came from another system, like a public school system. They come into it and say, that was a waste of, X number of years. Yeah. I learned nothing but that I hate this, that I don't like doing that, and that I hate this. Yes. And it's something that they just say, I learned nothing from that. It made me, all I was unhappy. Yeah. It put a lot of stress in my life, and they generally wish that they could just take that away and just not have that. But for people that have gone to the school for the whole time, they figure out that no matter what you do, you gain experience from it. And so that's true with everything. And so generally, I can't think of anyone I know that went to this school and regrets not spending more time doing something.
I have to agree with you. Listening to you makes me aware, because we also know today, even from neuroscience studies that are being done on the brain and on the learning of people, what we really are learning from is experience.
Mm-hmm.
We're really not learning from books and from knowledge. Knowledge is really not something teachable unless you really experience it. It doesn't mean much to a person.
Yeah, exactly.
For instance, a live stream like Michelangelo, who was a fantastic sculptor, grew up near and in a marble quarry.
Certainly.
Actually, he was the son of the foreman that ran that marble quarry, and so he just smelled and touched and felt and heard, and he was around this medium all of his childhood, and I think this is the medium through which this inner creativity starts to articulate itself.
Right.
Another example would be Temple Grandin, who is a confirmed strong artist, but she had the opportunity to grow up around livestock, around horses and cows,
right,
which became the basis of her complete and deep understanding, which she then created inventions that are actually super successful.
Right.
And, as an educator myself, I just so believe that we need to awaken this potential and this genius.
Certainly. Well, and so essentially what AVS provides is as the medium for Michelangelo was the marble that he was around his whole life, and for Temple Grandin, the livestock. What the students at AVS are exposed to and are around their whole life is freedom, and freedom to do whatever they want and learn the way they want to learn, and just pursue whatever their life goal is. They're around freedom and they're around people. And so just as those two people you mentioned can command the marble, in such a way that it's just so exact, and Temple Grandin knows exactly what the livestock needed. The students in AVS have a similar relationship with freedom, where they're around it all the time. They know exactly how to use the freedom they have to gain what they need and need what they want, and want what they need.
And they have that freedom to be in rhythm, almost in a rhythm with their own identity, with the true identity of who they are as an individual.
Right, absolutely. Well, as opposed to taking a test that says that you need to become whatever career or whatever trade. Yeah. They find their own whatever interests them. They find that through just the strangest means. I mean, everything from reading a book and discovering that they love writing, or getting the opportunity to weld and discover that they love welding, or whatever the case may be, they find what they love and then pursue it. Or they, if they don't find something that just stands out to them, they know how to be happy in life, and so they go into life and they pursue whatever it is that interests them at the time, and then they are happy and successful in life.
Yes, I can feel that wisdom behind that method. Now, for you personally, Ethan, what is your vision for your future? Do you live like one day at a time, and you have the right to do that because you are a young person.
Right.
I'm not saying that it is the right thing or the wrong thing to plan ahead. And there might also be really very different personalities, somebody who plans ahead and somebody who doesn't. But do you feel like you have like a certain dream for your life that you want to see and self-realize? Or do you feel, which is actually a skill that many are learning by studying meditation, to be really living in the now and accepting the circumstances as they are and see them unfold naturally?
Right.
Where do you feel more at home with your mind?
Much more like that, actually. I live moment by moment and try to live solely in the moment. I do have plans for the future, but they're relatively short-term plans. Like I plan to go to Australia this fall if I can find a way over there. But really, for me, I am rolling with the punches, and just if a door opens up, I take it, and that's worked well for me. A door opened up to get a high-paying job doing something that I liked to do, which is operating heavy equipment, which is something I wanted to do my entire life when I was a kid. Of course, I played with Tonka trucks and things like that, And so that door opened up, and I took it, and I did it, and enjoyed it while it lasted. And then after that, I was interested in doing something else, and so the door opened up to go and go sailing. And well, I really ought to say that I opened that door because apart from somebody mentioning that it exists, I found it and I made it happen. And so that's the way I am living. I am living in a reasonably spontaneous way. There are certainly those among us, as far as AVS graduates go, that have plans and they stick to them and they work. I don't want to give any specific examples because I'm not those people.
Yeah.
But the people that do have plans follow them. And as far as my shorter term plans go, they've all gone to plan as much as they can.
Yeah. And I also believe that there really is that universal guidance that when you really live fully who you are in the moment, that there always is that next door and that other door. I think many of these plans that are made are really based on fear and on the sense that we have to accomplish something.
Right. There's a common fear that if you don't go to college, you will not succeed in life, which is just ridiculous. And it's that's becoming much more known about nowadays, that you really don't need college to be happy and be successful in your life. And really, the only reason people should go to college is because they enjoy it. And I would like to go to college someday, probably for engineering. And I don't have any plans to use my degree after I get it. If I really like it and I get a job doing that and I enjoy it, I will. But I think there's a decent possibility that I will get a degree in something that I love and I'm really interested in, and then do something completely different. Only for the fact that I enjoyed learning it and enjoyed being in the environment of college. But then I go and find something, whatever interests me at the time.
And at the same time, if you go to college and pursue engineering, I could see your experience with heavy equipment to be a very valuable one.
Certainly.
Because you would have a hands-on experience with engineering type tools and mechanics, and that is something. I did go to college, but the fast track and the ambitious track, following my parental guidance.
Right.
And it was very much an issue of self-esteem going to college in my days. It was not something
Certainly.
that I genuinely wanted necessarily. And then when I got through it, I was at the same place where I thought, I haven't gotten what I need. I can't even use what I learned. It's not even it's not even something that makes me capable.
Right, and I it's that's totally applicable, and it's still true. I have lots of friends who are in college, and they are in college and active doing it, and they say, I have no idea how I'm going to use this.
Yeah.
Or like, I don't know if I want to do this with my life, but somebody's pushing them and saying, you need to go to college. You need to go to college. You need to get married. You need to have kids.
Right.
Nowhere in there they say you need to be happy.
Right.
And that's really what's key.
Or you need to be authentic. You need to
Right.
know who you really are.
Exactly. You need to pursue your own interests. And that's really too bad, because a lot of my friends that are a little bit older than me and are out of college basically say, yeah, I just spent a lot of money and 4 years of my life learning something I'm never going to use. It was fun while it lasted, but that's it. It's something I'm never going to use again.
Maria Montessori actually had the idea that every human being, as well as every non-human being, plant, animal life included, has a purpose, and that purpose is actually sort of like in us. Like an ant knows how to dig little holes in the ground so that plant and roots have air to breathe. So that all of us have a universal purpose. And she actually coined the term inner teacher, because she felt that children have an inner teacher that tells them what to do. And that really is very much in alignment with actually the philosophy or the school practices that you describe here at Alpine Valley School. We just want to make the public aware that there is a model like Alpine Valley School, and if you have any need to explore further, we want to invite you to come here and see for yourself and explore if this is an environment where your child could blossom and learn from the foundation of freedom to unfold his or her very creative potential. Too many children in this school are suffering. Too many children are feeling angry, frustrated, and actually are not performing. So we want to invite you to let the fears go and to explore freedom as an opportunity for you and your child. So today, we have so many problems in education, and we talk about so many kids that are on medication.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about autism and ADD and behavior disorders and disobedience. And do you see those same types of symptoms at Alpine Valley? Do you find that you have students that struggle with those types of symptoms, or do you find, and I know one particular family that seemed to struggle with those types of conditions, ADD and so forth, and the moment the child was in Alpine Valley, the symptoms disappeared and the child was fine. The young person was fine.
Certainly, and I've definitely seen where that has happened. And generally, I think it just comes from the fact that they are no longer being squeezed into a mold that they don't belong in, and really just have the room to breathe and have the room to do what they need to do to suit whatever their own mental capacity is, or physical capacity, or whatever it is, whatever they need to do, they can do it, and nobody's telling them not to do it or when to do it or how to do it. They just do it on their own because they know what they need.
And they feel respected.
Right, and generally, what I have seen is that it's a case where children are generally essentially misdiagnosed, and this is strictly my opinion, which is simply just that children love to play and run around and do that kind of stuff, and although it does not conform well with a class model where you're in a classroom for so many hours a day following a book route and doing these kinds of things, people have come up with reasons why they need to fix that. And my guess is that if I was never diagnosed with ADD or anything like that, and I certainly have no problem with anything like that, although I think when I was a child, if I'd have been tested, they probably would have said that I had a condition similar to that, if not that, simply because my mind would wander. And that's, people are born with a wandering mind where they, they're checking out everything.
Yeah.
And really it's unfortunate because children don't need to concentrate on a single thing.
I agree.
They need to be, they just essentially absorb a lot of things.
Yes.
And if you try to narrow that down to absorbing only the thing that is right in front of you and the thing that somebody tells you to have right in front of you,
it becomes a limitation.
It becomes a limitation. And of course that doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
Kids are free to do what they need to do and what they want to do.
In fact, that is another similarity or parallel with Maria Montessori, because she actually calls busy as the absorbent mind. And I believe also that the absorbent mind is on so many levels and busy at the same time with so many things at the very same time.
Right.
That we cannot even put words to it as adults. Like you said, the child absorbs numbers and also like geometric shapes and textures and tastes and sounds and everything. Right. And so we cannot put a linear focus there for a child and demand that is normalcy. Like today we have actually we have systems that declare that a 6-year-old needs to do a math task in 3 seconds, and that 3 seconds is the measure for mastery. And that is ridiculous, truly. Right. Because, it could be that today this is not even measurable, and 4 years from now he is ahead of everybody else.
Right, exactly. And that is commonplace.
Yes.
I mean, it's...
learning is not a linear process.
Right, and really just to sum it all up very simply is that if you leave a child alone to learn what they need to learn, they will learn it.
Yes.
And essentially they need to be trusted that they will look out for themselves. Maybe not in the exact moment. I mean, occasionally people do dumb things or whatever, but all in all, they will look out for themselves. They know what's best for themselves, and they really need no one to tell them what they need to do or who they need to be. They need the trust and the space to become that.
Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful life, and I wish you a beautiful trip in the ocean. So where are you going next?
So next I will meet up with my ship in San Francisco. I'm taking a train out in just a couple days, and I'll meet up with my boat there, and then we will continue to sail up the West Coast.
Are you alone on your boat, or you have?
Oh no, absolutely not. We have a crew of I think it's probably 10 people at this point. The crew fluctuates, and so I think when I get back on, it'll be about a crew of 10 people, and we're sailing with another boat called the Lady Washington, which has about an equal crew.
Amazing, amazing.
It is.
I mean, what did you say in your email? Happy winds, or what did you say?
Oh, I probably said fair winds and following seas.
Fair winds to you.